Hello, I hope you're doing well. Welcome back to the introduction of a brand new series here for League of Legends content. That's going to be a breakdown / recap of what happened the past week in LEC. We'll also have videos like this for NALCS starting up here very shortly. So we'll have 2 videos every single week, going to be released Monday or Tuesday, breaking down just a summary, a recap of what happened the past weekend, but also majority of the time I want to have a strong focus of importance on the 5 main things we're going to break down for all of you. I have transitions locked down. I'm excited to actually announce this stuff. Of course, we're going to show you guys the standings. We'll talk very briefly about that, but the 5 main things we'll talk about is the MVP of the week, the team of the week, the underwhelming player and team of the week, and very lastly, the play of the week. So I want to break down those 5 things every single weekend for both LEC as well as NALCS. It's going to be a great way for me to give my opinions, you guys give your opinions, and that way we can all together watch the matches and just give feedback. So I hope you guys all enjoy episode 1, week 1 LEC breakdown, and let's get into it. So of course the standings, everything else, you know, let's take it with a grain of salt. Everything we say this week, everything we saw this past weekend, certainly a grain of salt will be in the image with it, but the standings nonetheless are kind of somewhat surprising. You know, G2, Misfits, not a huge surprise themselves. I would say G2 by far and away, we'll talk about them later. Definitely a strong contending team so far, a team we expect to stay up there towards the top. Misfits, I would say similar things for, but the biggest surprise I would say, of course, the string of 1-1 teams, Vitality being one of them. We had Origin and SK have flip-floppy games where they look very strong one game, blown out the next, and of course the talking point of town right now, Fnatic going 0-2 week 1, which I would say some people out there are not very surprised by, right? Changing out a mid laner like that, a huge change for themselves, and a team who in both games I would say certainly had contention. Those are your standings after week 1, which I would say so far besides a few teams is, you know, again, like we said before, take it with a grain of salt. A lot of things will change, especially towards the bottom half. I was not surprised to see Rogue down there though, not surprised to see teams like Origin down there, although they surprised some teams as well in their matchups, splitting those teams. So a lot of big things happening week 1, but things certainly will be changing. But of course, let's break it down and get into our first category, transition time. Did you guys like that transition? I know it's very simple, but let's break it down, guys. Of course, the first category, the MVP. Each and every week, I'll probably choose a few MVPs, because if I choose just one, there's going to be a lot of angry commenters out there. And again, this is what I saw throughout my matchups. You guys can feel free to comment down below your MVPs. I chose 3 this week, and they kind of scale from most overlooked to probably the most obvious. The first of which, I'm going to go with Vitality's Cabochard. I think his top lane presence throughout them splitting those games was actually very nice to see. And among other people out there in the top lane, not too many overcommits. I think a consistency and a great presence and a great patience from him actually gives him an overlooked MVP award. The next one though, probably a bit more obvious, SK Gaming Selfmade, right from the get-go, guys. Prior to the remake as well as during their remake match against Fnatic, this guy's ganking ability and coordination communication with his team was subpar to none. I think definitely a guy we're going to look out for the entire split, and certainly worthy of an SK MVP. But the most obvious choice, I would say, has to be a G2 member. Which one? Can you guys guess it? I'm going to give it to Perkz, strictly because this guy has now proven himself able to be an ADC at the top level, at least through 2 matches. I'm excited to see, though, anyone out there who can actually test these guys and their map pools, but you cannot argue with Perkz so far. 7-3 on Zoe. Of course, unfortunately enough, when you have teams not ban out Aurelia, we're going to see it be played. He goes 8-0 on her. So I'm very excited to see the future of this guy, and he is my week 1 MVP. But let's roll into our next subject as well. And team of the week also, of course, has to go to G2. Yes, G2 alongside Misfits, both undefeated teams, the only 2 so far throughout the split, and I guess will be the remainder of the split. Kind of crazy to think about that. We saw Misfits go on a heck of a run last split. Let's see how long they can keep their undefeated streak this time. But G2, in the terms of how they actually became, actually landed their first 2 wins, were so dominant, so snowballed, 24 and 27-minute games, and these guys looked dominant the entire way through. That's why it was very difficult to actually choose an MVP overall from this roster, because, well, many of these players could have been chosen for that slot, and I'm very excited to see how these guys do in the future. Their champ pool is so deep. We have not seen it tested too much so far. I cannot wait for teams, though. Ban the Karthus, ban the Aatrox, for God's sake, ban the Aurelia. I beg you. Let's not see Perkz out again, but G2 has to be your favorite team so far, the best team I saw throughout this entire week. And yes, I know this might be the obvious choice for underwhelming team. That being Fnatic will be my choice for this week's underwhelming team. Of course, going 0-2, most surprisingly. I feel like I almost have to pick it, but at the same time, there were many points throughout both those games. Now, I will say I also kind of chose them because you even saw through the remake, they actually banned out the Rakan. They banned out a few other champs, which during the remake, actually after the remake, because they obviously had seen some things prior to. So that kind of made me choose them ever so more slightly for for the most underwhelming team. They even had the bans in their favor against SK during that remake, or at least from what they have seen, and they managed to lose the game no matter what. But I will say, although they are 0-2, and yes, my most underwhelming team based off expectations before this week, I do expect them, just like many other people out there, to remain in the top half just a few weeks from now. I really do sincerely believe that. Of course, Caps, some would say a huge downgrade. I would say just a gigantic change in that mid lane for Nemesis. We did not see too much presence out of this guy. He's not the flashy character that Caps could be. But again, he's not Caps yet. He does not want to be Caps, as we've heard many people out there say. And alongside that, I cannot wait to see this team finally just kind of lock things down slowly but surely, and I do believe their future is very bright, that being for Fnatic. And also, there were many points in both of their losses that the games could have turned around, especially against SK. That game was actually lost by a play we'll talk about here in a minute. That game was very much in Fnatic's favor, but one team fight partially lost, one Baron taken away, and that is what turned the tables. So Fnatic, yes, most underwhelming, but certainly a team with much promise going forward. And most underwhelming player, before we get into the play of the week, I do have to go with this one. And again, there could be so many options for a most underwhelming player. And I also want to preface this series by saying, although they were underwhelming in my books, they might be impressive in yours. And all these players certainly have, they're pro players. So let's take it with a grain of salt what I do say here. I'm going to go with Underwhelming, though, from FC Schalke. Although a Game 1 win against Vitality, they looked pretty impressive, of course, taking down Vitality, one of the Worlds participants, and definitely a surprising team at Worlds. Besides that, though, Underwhelming, his 5-3 cannon, I would say a series of overcommits. His scoreline does not do the justice of him almost throwing that game. Overcommits, overextensions, and also a huge thing that I saw throughout his cannon was a bunch of missed ults. I don't know if you guys saw that as well. I counted 2 or 3 at the very least, which only hit a couple champs, if not hit any at all. So a few shockwaves not going his way. I'm going to say Underwhelming, most underwhelming player this entire week, and G2 is a team who certainly capitalized on his underwhelming performance. He goes 1-7 on Urgot. Yes, arguably G2 a much better composition so far compared to Vitality. Of course, in the future might be a different story, but certainly this week a much better team than Vitality was, and they certainly capitalized on those overcommits. I go Underwhelming, guys. Too many overcommits for his roster. Definitely cost them. Although the game might have been blown no matter what, it certainly could have cost them the game against Vitality, and it did against G2. And very lastly, guys, play of the week. And I feel like I need to preface every time, but again, with these 5 things, right, there can be so many options. So feel free to comment down below, or maybe hit us up in the Twitter DMs with your links to your top plays or your MVP players of the week. But for the play of the week, it has to go to SK Gaming, my upset in the books for week 1 against Fnatic. It was actually the turning point, the double kill by the team, and a Baron take later on, which actually won them this game. Fnatic had the lead gold-wise, had the lead momentum-wise. They were winning every single team fight, taking a champ or 2 at a time. It was this fight, though, that turned things around for SK Gaming.
Fnatic know, though, that there's a big wave pushing in bot, so if they can just get the push on mid, it means they can start a fight or threaten the Baron.
Alright, Period takes a lot of damage, but they're chunking down Whippo. Bone Skewer catches onto Dreams. Broxah was looking for an opportunity, didn't find it. That's a shutdown. That's already a bounty goal off of Broxah, but look at Reckless. He's forced to flash. Here comes Selfmade, swinging that flail around. Whirlip continues to chase. His keeper's vertical be available so soon. The beautiful start. Reckless is down. SK Gaming get 2 of Fnatic. Nemesis is looking for a push forward. Huge damage onto Dreams. Inside the pit, this is high. Alright, Whippo's the only person pushed away. Nemesis is using the Shroud to his advantage. Baron down to 2,000. Hilly finds a skewer onto Dreams. Dashes in, looks for the stun. Selfmade finds the smite. He gets the Baron for SK Gaming.
As always, my name is Jake. I hope you guys all enjoyed LEC Week 1 breakdown. If you guys did enjoy, please do me a favor, leave a like. More importantly, leave a comment down below with anything you would have done differently. I really cannot wait to do this series for NALCS as well as LEC throughout the remainder of these next 8 to 9 weeks. It's going to be so much fun, but it takes your interaction to keep this series going. But hope you guys all enjoy, and until next time, I'll see you soon.